Well, since we agreed to have this discussion, things have changed a little in the world.
Yeah.
Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, as well as Japan, and particularly the reactors. So, what's your views on how that's going to impact our subject of today, the natural gas?
If I have my El Paso CEO hat on, it's very difficult to be in a business that has such a long gestation period. Our pipeline business, we build infrastructure that lasts 80 years. And the gestation period for a pipeline project is 4 or 5 years from the time we have an idea until we actually construct. And so, I think everybody just does the best they can with their crystal ball. Japan, to me, has a different characteristic in that it's obviously devastating on a human scale, but beyond that, it's still the third largest economy in the world. I think people have, with all the talk about BRICS in the last several years, people have forgotten about the relative size and importance of Japan, and we're about to remember it in a big way. Longer term, I would say, if you're in the natural gas business, on the margin, it is likely the case that nuclear energy, to the extent that it was going to exist in the next decade in the U.S. in terms of new nuclear power, is probably pushed to the right. It may be pushed to the right in a lot of places in the world, and so that 300 BCF a day global gas market might grow more than we thought it would have grown even 6 months ago or 9 months ago. I'm not a believer that happens in a great big hurry. Those are kind of long-term trends.
It seems like an interesting dichotomy that the Far East is stretched, doesn't have enough gas as they look forward, at least from 2013, 2015 or so. And here in the United States, how come we've got all this gas and it's so cheap?
Well, turns out that, as everybody in this room has been in the energy business for a long time, technology works. And we've unlocked a resource base that I think now finally conventional wisdom agrees is a really long-term, sustainable domestic energy source that is likely to be long-term and sustainable and price competitive. The role natural gas can play is, I think natural gas has the capacity to meet the incremental growth in power needs. I think it has the capacity to meet the needs that come from the retirement of old and inefficient coal. And it may play a role in transportation, at least in our view, as it relates to fleet transportation. Long-haul trucking, big municipal bus fleets, things like that.
In terms of compressed natural gas for them.
Yeah, compressed natural gas, and there are those who are proponents of LNG in fleets as well. That's a smaller hill to climb from an infrastructure standpoint. I think you've seen things start to move legislatively around the country. I think you'll probably see that intensify in Texas, maybe with the idea that you could create a sort of Houston to San Antonio to Dallas corridor that would have enough stations along it to satisfy long-haul trucking. That may make some sense. But one thing that we didn't know until recently, in fact, ANGA commissioned work by I believe it was IHS did the work, but to measure how many jobs are there in the natural gas business. We could tell you energy, we could tell you service, but we couldn't separate gas. So they looked at jobs related to natural gas that go from the rig through upstream, midstream, interstate pipelines, and I believe LDCs, and then they stopped at the city gate and they stopped at the power plant. And direct and indirect jobs is close to 3 million. So, and I don't think people knew that. That's a chunk of the U.S. workforce.
You're mentioning the coal states, so the Marcellus play, and yet we're finding in places that started the oil and gas business, Pennsylvania and New York, a lot of resistance to the techniques, primarily the fracking that lets us get to the shales and gas production. What's your response to the critics, or at least the skeptics, about the safety of natural gas in the productive stage?
Well, Well, I'm obviously a believer that we can do our business safely. I think as an industry we can do a better job of making people aware of that. I'm very hopeful that at the end of the day the science will win, because I think the science will show that fracture stimulation done properly is safe and effective. And a big challenge, of course, in New York is fracture stimulation uses a lot of water, and you have the Delaware River Basin that feeds the city of New York, and so I think that over time maybe a bigger challenge for our industry, which is not something we can't overcome, will be water use more than the effect of fracture stimulation and how we deal with that. And I know your company and other service companies, everybody's trying to come up with solutions that minimize that environmental footprint associated with water use.
I think that's absolutely true. Well, I said we're very honored to have Doug with us today, so please join me in thanking Doug for being with us.